the activist teachers with pride flags in their classrooms, right? They have a bullshit anthropology. Their anthropology says gender doesn't matter or doesn't exist, right? That is a bullshit anthropology. Steiner has a very solid anthropology, and even though people get scared when you start to talk about the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, and the ego, and they go, "Oh man, that sounds spooky." That is actually a very um, medieval and early modern Catholic
It's
um,
that, yeah, it's just common
anthropology.
sense.
Well,
That's why,
it
like,
is.
yeah, because you can
It's
raise levels of perception, but you just have
it's
to tell
Thomistic.
people, yeah. And then
Yeah.
we just have a fallen level of perception right now. We have a hypertrophied left brain and a fallen right brain. I think most people can vibe with that. Yeah.
Yeah, but that until I think unless you have a solid anthropology grounded in reality, you're not going to have a solid education system. You're just going to have bullshit, you know. And unfortunately, even Waldorf has been contaminated by wokeism uh, in the current climate, unfortunately. But that's, I mean, I don't think you can. I mean, really can't have a solid understanding. In fact, that's what one of the primary texts when Rudolf Steiner gave three when he's giving 2 weeks of lectures to the first teachers of his first school in Stuttgart. One of the books that collects some of the lectures in that is called Study of Man, right? So you have to know what a human being is and like we were talking about dentition and all this other stuff. And when is it appropriate for abstract thought and when is it not? And what happens if you do lead a child into abstract thought? Well, you know what he says? He said you give kids abstract thinking too early, like Illich would say with ABC, right? Is that you actually create the conditions for sickness for children with rickets or other kinds. And you could say ADHD. You could say all kinds of other things, right?
Right.
You're making them sick because you're overcharging the nervous system, because you're filling it with stuff, abstractions that the child can't hang with, and that the astral body hasn't come in or the etheric body hasn't been strengthened to kind of buffer the onslaught of that. And so you have a weakened etheric body, and because you have a weakened etheric body, when the astral body comes in, it hits the kid like a ton of bricks, and then that's when they start, and this is really what's happening, this is when they start, well, maybe I was born in the wrong body. Okay, and they're like, okay, what do you mean by I? And what do you mean by body? So who's got the right body? Well, how did you get the wrong body? Should we go back to the store and see? Did they give you the wrong size? How are you going to do this? And that's what I mean. That's a we're surrounded by bullshit anthropology.
I know, but what's the non-bullshit response? So I totally agree with you.
Well, I think the situation is described by Plato in the Republic, the cave, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, the one person finally starts to see, wait a minute, that's not reality, those are shadows.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna go see where that's coming from. And one of the things that people forget about when they talk about the allegory of the cave is one of the dangers is you come back and tell them what the truth is and they kill you.
Right.
Yeah. And I think so the best you can possibly do is not buy into the bullshit and then just tell them what the truth is, right? And they might look at you like you have two heads, and you might die, and then they find out 100 years later, you know what, that guy was onto something there. But I don't think you can't convince people, right? You can't of anything.
You love the people close to you. You try to do right by God and things like that. And then, yeah.
And don't buy the lie, right?
Right.
And don't say, well, yeah, that's your truth. Thanks for sharing, because, even if we could talk about Rudolf Steiner's anthropology, right? It's kind of a poetic anthropology, right? I mean, you don't want to turn it into dogma or anything, but it gives you a way to think about the relationship to, well, actually, actual phenomenology of what happens with the growing child and the change of teeth and all this other stuff, and it tracks, right? It makes sense.
It really, 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 really does. Yeah.
Yeah,
People
but
know that. Yeah.
and the thing is, if you were to tell somebody, you know, who are trying to get you on there are no genders, or there's no such thing as gender bandwagon,
Mhm.
you can't engage those people. You know, because I had students who were trying to do this. Well, one student, she was giving a presentation, and she said, well, everybody knows that there's no such thing as gender. I'm like, excuse me, what do you mean by everybody?
Right.
You know? And where did you come up with this idea? And this is just doing, you know, like, that's old school professor stuff. Interrogation of assumptions, right? Where do you get this idea from? My theory with Jordan Peterson is, I think he probably had a kind of a weak constitution, weak etheric body. Because, and the thing is,
I feel bad for his illness, I just think he wasn't saying anything innovative once he got reduced to being like a Daily Wire guy. It was the most boring drivel. And,
that's true, but on the other hand, he was before that happened, he was under such attack for just saying normal thing, you know.
Totally agree. And that I think you and I have always been fair to him, where we give him praise.
But I think those attacks, they take on a spiritual form.
Yeah.
And I think, and you know, the place where you feel things is in the astral body, you know. And I think because his etheric body was probably weakened, you know, not the healthiest constitution in the world, that with all that stuff going on, attacks on his etheric body, and Steiner calls this the pedagogical law, right?
Yeah.
So the pedagogical law is that, you know, so you're going to work with a kid say they have a hard time they have a weak etheric body, so they have a rough relationship to time and rhythm and mathematics. So you don't work from your etheric body on that kid. You work from your astral body, which is, you know, you work from the astral body onto the child's etheric body, which means you take interest in the kid, or, you know, introduce humor and emotion and that kind of thing in it, and then you can start to regulate their etheric body, or their etheric body will regulate itself. But now you've created the conditions. And the same thing I think would happen with Jordan Peterson is, you had these people from out of their egos, right? And they're almost demonic egos in some way, you know, acting on his astral body, you know, and filling out, you know, and causing concern. And nobody likes to hear hate directed at them 24 hours a day, right? And I think that because his etheric body was probably weak, or weak, not as strong as it could have been. I mean, he's intellectually, he doesn't work with his hands. He's not a farmer. Right, doesn't have any relationship with animals. I think that because of that weakened rhythm, plus he was traveling all over the place, you know, that also fucks up your etheric body. And I think because his etheric body was not able to create the kind of buffer between the astral body and the physical body, that it just went straight through the etheric body and hit his physical body. That's why I think he's sick.
But he became a parody of himself. How are those two things connected? Because I think we're more interested in the mental sickness than the physical sickness.
Well, I think he was exhausted. That's what I think happened. And
I think it was the money. I think it was the money and fear.
But I think the money, but also he didn't. Yeah. But the thing is, fear, meaning not having a livelihood.
Yeah, it's big.
Right? Oops. Losing your job as a professor, your job that you loved, and he
was attacked, and there's no doubt. And again, I think we've covered him fairly over the years, that in those totally courageous.
But I think he was exhausted, and he was like, okay, just give me, I'll take a job. And I think he didn't have the resources to do that anymore. And danger with everybody is to fall into self-parody.
Yeah, I think so.
That's
as soon as you get
one of my fears.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always. That's why we were talking about earlier how my nonconformist, you know, personality flaw. You know, I mean, one of my big fears. This is why I think I piss off a lot of people, because I don't want people following me or emulating me So I get annoyed when they start to put too much faith in what I have to say. I'm like, what the fuck? Who am I? You know how screwed up my life is? Yeah. You know, but I think that's, I don't know why I have such an, anxiety is too strong a word, but, you know, concern about becoming a parody of myself.
It should be everybody's chief concern.
You know who's really good on this? Is Carl Jung, where he says, and he calls it persona, right? Identifying with the persona, your mask, right? And I try not to do that, and it's hard not to do that. But he said the problem with the persona is, you know, that the professor identifies with his book, or the opera singer with his voice, right? Or the this or that, or anybody who gets kind of famous even on a small scale, that they identify with their persona. What Jung says, and this I think points to all those guys, but the problem with the persona is it's usually rewarded in cash.
Yeah.
I think it's a fact of, I think that's a kind of fact of life, and of modern life, is the persona gets rewarded in cash.
I think that's a good reductionism, you know, because we need some good ones. That does a fair share of load carrying.
I have yet to be rewarded with cash, though, so far so good.
Right.
And especially in this internet age, where it's so easy to turn oneself into a product, right?
And do you think, like, when you think of Hollywood,